There's still folks coming in, but let's go ahead and get started. Bob Dailey, what do you have to tell us about drip irrigation this morning?
Well, I hope I have enough to tell you that'll get some people interested in it. I have a lot of stuff, so hopefully we can learn something and possibly encourage everybody to, or some of you to, be involved in drip irrigation. So if you're ready, I'll get started.
We're ready.
Okay, here we go. As you can see, there are a lot of people involved in this presentation. One is, of course, Terry and the Woodlands Township, who are the host of this program and have done so much work in water conservation and also things like drip irrigation. A lot of the parks in the Woodlands have drip irrigation and use it very, very wisely. Additionally, Woodlands Water is a sponsor of this program. Texas A&M Extension and the Texas Master Gardeners are also involved in this in a way that I was trained. I have advanced training in drip irrigation and also rainwater harvesting and propagation and several other things. So they have helped me learn a whole lot of stuff about a whole lot of stuff. So let's just talk a little bit in the beginning of how drip irrigation began. This is a desert in Israel. In the late 1940s, a man by the name of Bloss set up a program in the desert. He devised a system to bring water out to the desert and use it efficiently. And this eventually became what is known as drip irrigation. So this is a picture of a gentleman out here in the desert in Israel, working on a drip irrigation program. And as you can see, there's a ring of water. It's called a wetting front that's beneath this plant. There's no sprinklers involved in any of this planting. And as you can see, it's pretty big and it goes way beyond the horizon here. So as a result of this, we have developed a whole group of different drip irrigation systems that are very effective. And there's some really nice companies that are involved in this. Interestingly, and I'll mention this later, but interestingly, a lot of your big box stores and some of your little box stores have developed programs where you can go and actually buy kits to set up your irrigation system for drip. Ace Hardware, for instance, carries it in the Woodlands. All your big box stores carry it, Home Depot, Lowe's. And so if you're interested in those things, you might go over there and take a look at them. Several of the companies that produce drip irrigation systems have little booklets that are available when you at the point of purchase that you can actually take and read through them. They're very good, and they show you step-by-step instructions on how to do irrigation. Additionally, there's a lot of programs on YouTube that also have great ideas and great ways of showing you how to do that, how to put drip irrigation. And at the end of this program, I have some of those addresses listed. So I think Terry's going to record this program and make it available on online, so that, and I think she's going to post it on YouTube too, that you'll be able to see what programs are out there and be able to access them in order to get better information in case I don't explain it properly, and that's a possibility as well. So I'd be interested in hearing your critique after this thing. So let's talk a little bit about drip irrigation, why it's important. 95 to 100% of drip irrigation is efficient compared to 75% or less with sprinkler systems. So a drip irrigation system will save considerable amounts of water. And you say, well, it only applies to my ornamental plants and my bedding plants. Well, that's not true. And I'm going to explain that as well, because there's been some extensive research on this and extensive sampling of different drip irrigation systems for different types of growth, including lawns. So I will include that in this presentation. One of the reasons we want to use drip irrigation, it reduces water loss due to evaporation. Now we know that sprinklers lose about 30 to 50% of their water through evaporation, because you're spraying water into the air, especially if it's hot. That water is gone. It goes out into the atmosphere. And it might come down as rain, but it won't come down here. I mean, it might come down in the Gulf of Mexico or in North Texas or, even Minnesota. So the amount of water that you use in drip irrigation can save considerable amounts of water. And why would we want that? Why would we want to do that? Well, there's a lot of reasons. One, drip irrigation saves water and money. If you know your water bill right now and how much it is, and we actually in this area pay a lot less for water than people in the rest of the country do. An average bill for 10,000 gallons of water in Atlanta, for instance, is $386. Here it's significantly less for 10,000 gallons of water. So you can see that throughout the nation, and actually throughout the world, water is becoming very expensive. The Ogallala Aquifer, which feeds all of the Midwest and all our great farms in the Midwest and all of our food production areas, is 50% depleted right now. 50% is significant. Our aquifers here are being depleted as well. And that's because of increased population. In the Midwest, mostly it's because of farming, but the farming is required to feed our millions of people. But here, population has increased. We know that in Louisiana, there are other problems that they're having with reduction of the aquifers. So we're seeing a whole lot of circumstances where water is becoming very precious. In the last drought, the town of Wichita Falls, for instance, ran out of water, and they had to use a treated effluent, which is basically sewage water, to drink. And that could possibly be a thing of the future. So it behooves all of us to save water, but it also behooves us to save money. And so by reducing our water consumption on our lawns or our bedding or our plant bedding or ornamental plants, by reducing that, and even trees, and I'll show you some examples of that, by saving that water goes a long way to saving water for the future, for our children, for our grandchildren, for their children, and so on. So that's a really important thing, saves water and money. Drip irrigation also reduces water loss and contamination due to runoff. And this is something that we don't think about in a lot of ways. For instance, you can see from this picture that water is running off into the street. How many times have we all seen that driving through a neighborhood or anywhere else? We've seen people watering their lawns or watering their plants, water running off. Well, where does that water go? That water goes into our storm drains. From the storm drains, it goes into the creeks and rivers. From there, it goes into Galveston Bay and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico. If we're using pesticides or herbicides on our lawns, that is also washed into the Gulf of Mexico and those areas. So one of the problems is that we are actually helping to pollute the waterways just by overwatering, using so much water on our growing plants. This is a serious problem for contamination. I think DDT was banned in 1983, I believe that's the date, and there are still remnants of DDT in the silt in Galveston Bay, and that's why some of the sea life is unfit to eat in the northern part of the bay. So one needs to look at that and think about that. It's not just our little yard or our little facility that's using water and running it off into the street and into the storm drains is not a good thing. Let's go on. I'm going to get off my soapbox now. One of the things it does is reduces the leaching of water and nutrients below the root zone. And I want to talk a little bit about that. We have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, calcium, magnesium. You can read all these. These are nutrients that plants need to grow, any plant. And that includes your lawn. That includes your trees. It includes everything. These are the nutrients that they need. Well, one of the things that happens when we use sprinkler systems is they tend to wash out all of the nutrients in the soil. They leach them out. And of course, that's gone too. It goes out into our streams and waterways. So it's important to keep our nutrients in the root zone. And the way we do that is through drip irrigation. Now, there are wetting patterns. I mentioned that before. This is called a wetting front. And you can see by the two pictures on the right, the two types of drip irrigation. One is a soaker hose, the other one is a drip hose. But you can see both of them are bringing water right down into the soil and not into the air at all. So there's just a minuscule amount of evaporation in there that is totally unnoticeable and untraceable. So this is just kind of an example of how the water gets down there. And I'm going to show you many, many examples of that. So what are the uses for drip irrigation? What do we need? Why would we want to do that? And how would we want to do that? And what plants benefit from that? Let's look at these. This is a rose garden. Now, roses don't like to get their feet wet. And one of the things with sprinkler systems is that they will indiscriminately spread water across our roses or any of our gardens. And that can cause things like fungal infections. You know that fungus is the #1 disease vector in Southeast Texas for plants. Fungus will grow on leaves that are too wet. Why? And why is that in Southeast Texas? Because we have such humidity here that fungus grows really rapidly. So we are exposing our plants to fungal infections in our gardens. And that's important to understand. If we want to keep our roses, what a great way to keep them healthy is just by watering down to the roots, not too much water. And we can regulate that amount through drip irrigation. So the water gets right down into the roots, but not too much to harm the plant itself. So let's go on. Here's a perennial garden. There are some annuals in here, but this is a beautiful perennial garden. And it is run by, is watered by drip irrigation. And I have a lot of pictures of these, of perennial gardens, and you'll see them later in the presentation. Shrub areas, here's some hydrangeas and some hostas and other plants growing in here. These are all drip irrigated. And as you can see, these plants are extremely healthy. I don't see any, I looked at these and I didn't see any spores or any fungal infections on there. I didn't even see a lot of insect infestations on here. So I think that was really indicative of what drip irrigation can do. Vegetable gardens. I had a friend tell me, well, my garden is too big. If you can see the upper right in this picture, that's a pretty big garden. And if, as you remember, the first slide in here, one of the first slides was the Israeli garden that they had stretched to the horizon. So as you can see in the upper right, this guy's just starting to put drip irrigation into his large garden, almost a truck patch, if you can look at it that way. And as you can see down in the bottom of that picture, there's some more drip lines that he's getting ready to install. And on the left, you can see a smaller garden that's a raised bed that uses drip efficiently. And you can see how lush this vegetable garden is. Below that is a good example of how drip irrigation works in a garden without the plants. And as you can see, these little round drips in here are results of the garden. And I suspect he planted, and in fact, I know he planted seeds in here, and he's just waiting for them to germinate. And as you can see over here on the right, lower right, there's a square foot garden. And out of that square foot garden, if you look on the far right of that photograph, there's a little line coming up, a little white line. And that line stretches all the way across that garden. And what it does is that is the entrance point for the water to go out into the garden. And he's got drip irrigation lines all the way through there. And I think it's an efficient way to run a garden. Ground covers, my daughter is helping me do some ground covers right now, and she's really into herbs. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is doing a drip irrigation through our ground covers. And that works really wonderful because I don't have to overspray. The water gets right down to the herbs. And you know, this is a continuing thing that I'm going to bring up, that the water gets down into the soil and not into the air and not into the leaves. One of the other ways you can use drip irrigation very, very effectively is watering your foundation. A lot of people worry about that. You know, is my foundation going to crack? Is there problems there? Well, drip irrigation can give you an efficient way of watering around your foundation to keep those things from happening. Watering trees. Now, I have a friend of mine who hauls water during dry times, hauls water to the different trees and pours it down in buckets around the tree. And that's not a very efficient way of watering plants. But this is, and the Texas Forestry Service, which is also a branch of Texas A&M, has some methods. The one on the lower left is actually one of their methods of watering trees. I would say that he's got too many rings in here, because you should water trees at the drip line, and that outer line of pipe is really where he should be watering, not down around the trunk. The one on the upper left is, I think he got a little carried away there. That's a lot of water going into that tree. A drip irrigation, I'm going to explain that in a minute, of how you can actually regulate where the drip goes and how where the water goes. And I'll explain that in a little while. I'll show you that. Now, here's something interesting. This is a median in a street, and what happens is they've tapped into the valve, to the feeder valve, and put this drip irrigation in. And what they're going to do is plant all kinds of great. My light just went out. Great information. Excuse me. Great plants in here, and this will be lush and beautiful. But the thing I wanted to mention is that I have a lot of friends who live in cul-de-sacs, and they take care of that little island in the cul-de-sacs. And I know that they go out there every day, and every other day, or every twice a week or something like that, and water that cul-de-sac with a hand hose. If they put drip irrigation on it, and there is a way to connect drip irrigation to a hose. So all you have to do is put your hose across there, hook it up, go back in, have a cup of coffee, eat a donut, and come back out maybe an hour or two later, and you have already watered it. Just disconnect your hose and bring it home. It's a great way of taking care of the water system and not having to stand there with a hose and water all your plants in your cul-de-sac. I think it's a great way of doing things, and it saves you a lot of trouble and time. Vineyards. I know we don't have too many vineyards here, but there are vineyards in Texas. This is in Napa Valley, actually, as you can tell by the mountains in the background. But it's a very efficient way of doing fruit trees. Any kind of fruit trees would benefit extremely well, especially citrus, by having drip irrigation. And as you can see, this line, there's a dark line across the bottom. That's a drip irrigation line that's been run across the roots of those plants. And look how lush they are. They're just lush and green, and he's going to have a really good harvest. And you can do that with citrus. A lot of people here grow citrus, so I think that's important. Greenhouses. People have greenhouses. I have friends who have greenhouses, and what they do is they'll take a bucket of water or a watering can and bring it in and to water their plants in a greenhouse. Well, you can rig up a system that actually produces water that you can put down on the plants in your greenhouse without having to haul cans of water or into your greenhouse. I think that's an excellent way of doing it. And lawns. People say, "Oh, I don't know about lawns. How would I water my lawn with a drip irrigation?" Well, there are ways. And Texas A&M and Florida A&M both have gotten together and developed some really important and interesting ways of watering the lawns. In fact, I know Mike Potter over at Extension has done some, with the help of some master gardeners, has done some extensive research on drip irrigation in lawns over there. And that's one of Mike's specialties is lawn care. So you might want to take a look over there, go talk to Mike, or go over there on a Wednesday when everybody's over there working and ask them to give you a tour of the whole garden. It's beautiful. And parking lot entrances. How many times have you gone into a parking lot and seen just terrible nothing on there? Trees are dead, plants are dead, if there are any plants in there. It's a great way to take care of parking lot entrances, so that and even your lawns, I mean, even your yard, you can do this with as a for your entrance of your driveway. Here are some drip irrigation installation options. We can design and install for a new landscape. We can convert an irrigation system that is existing. In other words, if we have a sprinkler system, you can actually convert your sprinkler system to a drip irrigation system. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. You can attach it to a garden faucet. You don't have to have some kind of real intricate plan for your drip irrigation. You can actually attach it to a garden faucet. And I'm going to show you some of those examples in a minute too. Here's what you're going to need for drip irrigation. Here are some things. I know this might sound daunting to you, but everything I'm going to show you here is available in kit form from your big box stores, or you can order it online from a number of suppliers. Most of the stuff I have here is from Rainbird. Rainbird is one of the many manufacturers. I use Rainbird because that's how my sprinkler system was put in, and I just drain it off use the water from my sprinkler system. I'll show you how to do that in a minute. So what you need is you need a backflow preventer. You need pressure regulators. A backflow preventer keeps the water from backing up from your drip system into your water line from your home. Because if it does, let's say you had a fire, you have your drip irrigation system on, or your sprinkler system, and there's a fire down the street, and the firemen go up and attach to the fire hydrant and use that to put the fire out. Well, that's going to cause a drop in pressure in your water system. When that happens, it can actually suck water back into your home. Now, if that water has soil in it or something else, or pesticides or anything like that, it can get back not only into your home, but into the entire water system. So it's important that you have a backflow preventer. Now, your home should have a big backflow preventer from your sprinkler system. But if you're attaching it to a hose bib or some other way of getting water to your through your drip system, you need another backflow preventer to put on there. And they're very cheap. This one, I think, costs $2. But it comes in a kit. If you can buy the kit, you buy all these things. Pressure regulators, water comes in about 40 to 50 pounds per square inch. But most of your drip irrigation systems only provide enough water for maybe 30 psi's. So what the pressure regulators do is when the water comes out of your spigot at 40 or 50 pounds per square inch, what'll happen is this will reduce the pressure back down to a 30 psi. And this is a filter. Now, you need a filter on there just to take out impurities that may be going on in the line or coming out through your system. You want a filter on there. You need flexible tubing, so you can run that wherever you want. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And this is to your left, lower left, is flexible tubing without emitters. And then the one next to it is flexible tubing with emitters. I'm going to go over that too. And here are some fittings that you will need, as these also come into drip packages. You need some risers if you're going to use your sprinkler system to feed your drip irrigation, and you can do that. Hole punches to make little holes in your drip system to put little attachments on if you want a little sideline or to go to a specific plant or something like that. You need cutters, but these cutters, I use my pruners to cut drip irrigation lines. It's very easy to cut them. You can get a cutter if you want to. I don't think you can probably use a good pair of scissors on it. Plugs and repairs. If you have a problem with your system, you can buy this little kit. And here are timers. You can just use this really small egg timer, I call it, or a sophisticated system that runs on electricity or a battery. You can do all those things. If you want to do that, you can just do it manually. You don't need to do that. If you want to go outside, check your garden, turn the system on, let it water for an hour or wherever it is. Drip systems take longer to water than regular sprinkler systems do, because it gets the water right down into the soil. So you don't have to have that sprinkler system pushing water all over the area, and the systems are not effective or efficient. This is a friend of mine, Mike Mindek, and Mike and I and another friend of mine who has passed on, Jim Buncho. This is behind Terry MacArthur's office. And what we did, this was 15 years ago, I guess, we put in a drip irrigation system. First, we put in a 2,500 gallon rainwater harvesting system to harvest water from the roof of this building. We put a pump on it, and we put lines through here. I guess we watered about 2,000 square feet of native plants in this area. And there's Mike helping put a system in. We had a ton of master gardeners come out and help us put this system in. And I believe it's still operable. I'm not sure. You can check with Terry to see if it's operable or not. And here's some examples of a garden that's been watered with drip irrigation. And this is some of the pictures from there. As you can see, they're lush and beautiful and very attractive to the eye. Equipment is readily available. It's relatively inexpensive, and it's really easy to install. And you can do it yourself. If I can do it, who has, I mean, I'm not even allowed to use power tools because I'm not very mechanically inclined. And that's why I love drip irrigation, because I don't have to worry about doing things, and I can cover it with mulch. Mulch actually hides a multitude of sins. So that's a little side thing you can take, write it down. Mulch hides a multitude of sins. I use that all the time. So the equipment's relatively available, and these are just some kinds. This one on the left is a tubing. The one on the right and the left are different kinds of tubing to use to get the water to the drip system. Below that is another example. These all come in packages. So you have 1/2-inch tubing with no emitters on the left, 1/2-inch tubing with online emitters to the right. And as you can see on the right, there's little holes in there. Those little holes are actually drip emitters. You can get drip emitters for 12-inch. In other words, every 12 inches, there will be a hole in it, or a drip emitter. Or you can get them with 18 inches, 24 inches, 36 inches. And you can install it in a new landscape. You can run it off your faucet, or you can convert a system, and I'll explain this to you in a minute. Here's some 1/4-inch tubing, which are much smaller. And you have two of those kind. You have one with no emitters, and you have one with emitters, and you can see the little holes in these. These are emitters. And both of the systems, the 1/2-inch and the 1/4-inch, are compatible. So you can use the 1/4-inch or not. It's up to you. And there are types of drip irrigation. I'm going to show you one. This is just a little bubbler that comes off one of the lines that I showed you. This is just a typical, easy drip irrigation. This is the kind I use, and you can see that little bubble coming out. That's how drips work. This is a thin wall drip line. These are rather expensive, and I know they advertise it as being inexpensive, but I find them rather expensive and not as effective as other types of drip. And of course, this is a little bubbler that's kind of on a stake, just raising above the plant level, just to get water down into the system. And of course, this is a soaker hose. I'm going to talk a little bit more about soaker hoses in a little while. So I talked about these emitters and the difference, but here is a cutaway of an internal emitter. And as you can see, this is the exit hole. I'm looking at the right picture now. There's an exit hole, and it looks like just a little hole in the water. But if you look inside, there is actually a process in which the water is taken and put out through that hole. So it's important to have these things. You can't, I guess you could just put an emitter down, or excuse me, a pipe down there and just drill a hole in it, but it wouldn't be as efficient. And here is a T joint. These are really easy to do. This is just a piece of the pipe that I showed you earlier with holes in it with drip emitters. You can't see them in here because I wanted to show you this right here, this middle thing. This is a T joint. With pipe, you have to screw them in, or PVC, you have to glue them all together and all of this. This you don't need to worry about. All you do is insert these brown things over this little T. The T has little ridges in it. And when this pipe, this line goes over those ridges, it seals it. It might be a little hard to do. What I do is leave it out in the sun for a while, leave the pipe out in the sun for a while, and then use a little soapy water, dip them in a little soapy water, and they go right on. It's pretty simple. It's very simple. I promise you, if I can do it, anybody can. And there are different brands. You have a Rainbird, and you have a Hunter, and there's 10 or 15 different brands of these things. You just look around and you can find them either online. And here's an elbow, and this is an interesting way of doing it. And you can see this is just a little plant stake. And what we've done is drive that into there just to hold that corner down and make it look more attractive. Drip irrigation pressure, as I mentioned before, operating pressure is for most drip systems is 15 psi to 30 psi, and so you need a pressure regulator, as I explained before. You can convert an existing system. I have actually done this in the past, and there was a riser here on the right. You can see that riser coming up. Added a little piece onto the riser, and then screwed in one of those little ridge things, and I'm going to add a emitter right onto that little brown thing that's sticking out right there, and that will be my drip irrigation system. How are we doing to it? Okay. And here you can see, here's the riser. It's come out. That's this riser. The riser on your left, upper left, is in the photograph is the same as the from a different point of view as the riser on the far right. And what you can see is there's a T right there. This little light brown area is a T, if I could show you that. And then this line goes all the way around this planting area. And then they've put cross lines, and I'm going to show you that in a minute too. Cross lines in here, so everything is watered. So this is a closed system. Everything is closed, and that water just goes around and around and around, and it waters the plants. Drip irrigation design and installation. I'm going to explain that to you. You can do it yourself, which I prefer because then I know where everything is. And if you have a problem, occasionally a squirrel will eat through one of the lines. It's so easy to repair these lines. You don't have to worry. You don't have to call in an irrigator to repair these lines. You can do it yourself, and it takes about 5 minutes. So much, much more efficient cost-wise and time-wise than having an irrigator. But you can put in a new irrigation system. You can convert an existing system, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, Jim. You can attach it to a faucet. You don't need to have a real sophisticated system to do that. Or you can place it in the landscape and attach a garden hose to run the water. The other option is to get a licensed irrigator to design and install your system. So I think all of these things are important to look at if you are interested in drip. I like to do it myself. You can get a licensed irrigator to do it, but you know what the cost will be on that. Oh, and here is an example of drip irrigation in a planter. And I'm going to show you some more of these in a minute, but this is actually a non-emitter line. They have punched a hole with that hole puncher I showed you earlier, put a 1/4-inch line coming up into this plant, and then having an emitter on the back of it that actually drips water into this plant. So this plant is new. I see he's got some rocks, or he might should have done a little better on putting soil in there, but he did a good job. Okay, so now we want to talk about new installation, or I don't know why that or is in there, but let's go back. Okay, this is coming from a hose or a faucet, hose bib. Either way, you can do it. Here, we have water from a main line or a faucet or a hose that's coming in, and I have a valve here, and I can turn it off and on for this valve. If I wanted to, I could keep this valve open all the time and put a timer here, and that timer will regulate the water coming through here. Right here, I have another valve where I can also put a timer on. If I want to do an electric timer, I could definitely do it this way. And the valve, I can also turn off here. So if I have a break in the line, let's say here or here, I can always turn this off to fix this line. This is a little filter that's coming up. Well, let me go back here. So we have a backflow preventer, and that's to keep water from coming back into the system. Because remember, I'm hooking this to a faucet or a hose bib, and what's happening is if that water comes back through here, it's going to contaminate not only your home, but the rest of the water system all over your area. So you must have a backflow preventer here. And of course, this is a valve I mentioned earlier. This is a filter just to keep impurities out of the water. If they back up or something, it'll try to keep most of those out. And this is a pressure regulator. And this is reducing the pressure from 40 pounds per square inch to about 30 or 25, so it can get into the water and not break this line. One of the things you don't want to do is have too much pressure in there, because it can break the line, and you don't want to do that either. So there's the water going out. Now on this, I'm going to put a drip line, and that drip line is going to go wherever I want it to go, and that will water my plants. So guess what? If I have a sprinkler system and I want to change it into a drip system, there's a way to do it. And the way to do it is you can get an adapter that's made by the same company that makes your sprinkler heads. And that adapter will allow you to put a drip irrigation connection on the top of your sprinkler. And that is really, really a good way to do it. And I have done this on some of my drip. And this is a sprinkler head. And I'm going to show you a little bit more about that later. But this is a sprinkler head. It's been the top of that sprinkler head has been unscrewed, and the adapter has been put in there. And what happens is that water goes straight into this line. So that's what you want if you want to have a sprinkler system done. One of the things I want to say about a sprinkler, and here's a conversion adapter. One of the things I want to say about a sprinkler system is some of the people, most of your irrigators say that, oh, you only need one riser, one conversion adapter in a zone. In other words, you have to close off all your sprinklers in that zone. I don't know if that's really necessary. You can think about it if you want to, or maybe consult somebody else, but I don't think it's necessary. I think you can put some sprinklers on, some drip irrigation on several within that zone. So here's a barb tee. These are something I showed you about earlier. So this is going into here on the, I'm going to put a drip line here and a drip line here on the left and the right of this brown thing. So I have a pressure regulator in here from the sprinkler and a filter. So what's happening is that pressure regulator is actually reducing the pressure, and it's allowing me to retrofit a sprinkler system. What a great way of doing it. And here is a different way, a little bit different way. Here's a pipe that has 1/2 inch non-perforated feeder line. So there are no emitters along here at all. But what we've done is punched a hole with one of those hole punches in each of these areas along here, and then put in 1/4 inch perforated drip lines through this entire area here. And what that's done is we have just one line here, a feeder line, and then we have drip irrigation all the way through here. It's another way of doing it. You can choose the way you want to do it. It's just, I know at the community garden on Alden Bridge, at the Alden Bridge Sports Park, they use this system a lot. And I would encourage you to go by there. It is a masterpiece. The township and the interfaith have done a remarkable job. And I've been to a lot of community gardens, and this is probably one of the most beautiful and well cared for community gardens that I've ever seen. It's really a showplace, and both of the township and Veggie Village, the Interfaith Garden, have done extraordinary work there. And on Tuesdays, they have harvest. So it's early now. I think they start harvesting at 8 o'clock in the morning. Go there, 8 or 9 o'clock, they'll still be there, and walk around the garden, ask permission and walk around the garden. Maybe somebody will take you. We have some garden advisors there, and somebody can take you around and show you the garden and give you some ideas about drip irrigation. They've got some really remarkable things in there. The T-tape, supposedly inexpensive. It's got a thin wall, and it's a tape, and you unroll it. This is about 400 feet here. This is the way it works. The water comes up and runs through this little system, and then comes out through an emitter and drips out. Very similar to the hard pipe the hard irrigation system, but it drips out here. This box, this roll of tape cost about $250. So I don't know how inexpensive it is. That's quite a thing. You can put in a drip irrigation for under $500 for your entire yard. If you would like to do that, it's very possible to do that. You can get the systems at Home Depot or Ace Hardware or Lowe's, and some of the nurseries also carry that. So you want to look around and see and price them out. And online, you can get them online too.
Bob?
Yes, ma'am. Do you want to stop for a minute?
Before you move on, we do have a few questions. Would this be a good spot to take a break for a minute?
Be a wonderful spot, yes.
So I want to remind everyone that everyone who is registered, which means you're here, so presumably you registered and I have your email address, you'll get a notice in a few days. It'll just take me a few days. And this recording and Bob's PowerPoint presentation will be uploaded onto our website, and you'll get a link to both watch the video on the Environmental Services YouTube channel, as well as to be able to review these slides that Bob has shown if you'd rather just look at the slides than watch the recording again. So don't worry too much if you think you missed something. But so Bob, let's, if you don't mind, let's back up for just a minute for some questions that are kind of nuts and bolts. You
Sure.
mentioned earlier that you can save water using drip. Estimate for us the amount of water that's typically lost in a sprinkler system, and how that might relate to the savings using drip.
Of course, be happy to do that. Drip irrigation, excuse me, well, on sprinkler irrigation, you can use up to 50% of the water that comes out of there. You can estimate 50% is actually evaporates, or it runs off into the street. And there's a whole lot of elements about that, and I can explain more in depth if you'd like. But the problem is that a lot of our lawns are in bad shape. The soil under our grass is in terrible shape. And so a lot of the water that we put on with sprinklers just runs right off into the street because the soil is so hard that it's practically dead soil. So it runs off into the street. So very little of that water actually gets into our yard, onto our grass or onto our plants. Very, very little of it. Most of it is either lost through evaporation, or it runs off into the street or your neighbor's yard or somewhere else. So yes, you can lose about 50%, between 30 and 50% of your water. So if I'm paying, let's say I'm using 10,000 gallons a month, and most of that water is going to be used on your lawn or in your plants. You could probably save 2,000 or 3,000 gallons of water a month by just switching to drip irrigation. So, and even more. I mean, you could save up to 50%. So you could save up to 5,000 gallons. Now, a lot of people, that's the average usage for any home, is 10 for a home with 2.3 people, which is the average in the, let's say in the Woodlands or in Conroe or other places, other municipal areas. You can use up to 50% of what water you use in a home on your lawn or your plants. So if I use 50%, I'm using 10,000 gallons. So that's 5,000 gallons I can actually save through drip irrigation. So
Okay.
I don't know if that answers the question, but
Yes, I think that's a great answer. Back to, you talked about the difference in pressure between sprinkler systems and drip.
yes.
So would you just refresh that, our memory on that part, by giving us an example of about what pressure the water is for a sprinkler system and why it's important to reduce that pressure for drip?
Sure. Water coming into your system, when you turn your faucet on, for instance, in your sink or the bathtub or your shower, that water comes out at about 40 PSI, 40 pounds per square inch. It can be up to as high as 50. It depends on your water system, how far you are from the pumping station, a lot of those things, but generally it's 40 to 50 PSI coming out. However, remember that these lines are made of plastic, PVC, but it's a light PVC and it's a bendable PVC. So there is a danger that if the water pressure is too high, it can break something in the system. So you want to reduce that to, let's say, 30 PSI. So the little pressure regulator on the bottom of your system, the bottom of your entrance system where the water goes in to your drip, is reducing the water pressure from 40 PSI or 50 PSI to below 30 PSI. And the reason for that is, one, it can break the system, and two, it can put too much water onto your plants, and you don't want that to happen either. the drip irrigation with the perforations every 12 inches, for instance, will put out a gallon of water every hour. So if I want a gallon of water on my plant, each plant would get a gallon of water. I think that's plenty for a plant. But if I put the pressure too high, several things can happen. One, I could break my line. Two, I can be putting way too much water on my system, on my plants, and I don't want to do that either. I want to have a good, even distribution of water, but I don't want to overwater because it solves the problem.
All right. Are you going to be talking more about specifically when to use 1/2 inch and when to use 1/4 inch tubing?
Yes.
And are you, all right, are you also going to be talking any more about spacing? How do you know how close or far apart to put emitters? How do you know what proximity to put the drip line to your plants? Will you be talking about that more in detail?
Yes, I will.
Okay, and you mentioned the AgriLife example and the one here at our building where there's a drip line running from some sort of tank. You mentioned a pump. Is that what most people who have, say, for example, a 300-gallon tank that they catch rainwater, would they need anything other than a small pump that pushes the water out through their line?
No. If it's, let's say 300 gallons, well, you could, unless if your tank is very high, you can use gravity flow, and they would have to be pretty high, but maybe 7 or 8 feet from the ground. But I have a friend of mine who lives not far from me who actually put in 2 500-gallon tanks at his home. And he has a little portable pump. I mean, it's the size of a briefcase or smaller, and it's got a handle on it. He just moves it out there, plugs it in, and hooks up this tank to it, and it waters, and the hose on the other end, and it waters the system. Or he can put in drip irrigation. He's got a rose garden, and one of the things he does is he has drip irrigation to that rose garden, but he only puts it on when he has his, he only does it when he has his little electric pump on. So, I mean, you can put a big pump. The one at your office, Terry, is a real expensive pump, but it's real efficient, and because we have so much area to water. So yes, you probably would use a pump, but you don't need a real expensive pump. And now they're actually making solar pumps that the sun runs. You can put a timer on it, and it will open the valve and push out the water, pump the water out to your system. So there are all kinds of ways to do it now, but it's imperative that you build the pressure up from the tank. If you have a rain tank, you have to build that pressure, because if you have it on the ground, the tank on the ground, you're going to get about maybe 10 psi out of it, and that's not enough to push the water through and get it out into your plants. Does that answer the question?
I think so, and we can always revisit it later if it didn't. You mentioned the Alden Bridge Community Garden as a place they could see an example. Would you be able to tell us right where we can find that? Isn't it on 242 at the sports fields?
Yes, I can. If you go up Green, what is it? Green, the street that runs north-south between Research and 242. It's near your office, Terry.
Oh no, you talking about Greenbridge?
Greenbridge, excuse me. Okay. In Greenbridge, if you drive up Greenbridge from Research to 242 and take a right on 242, it's the third driveway on your right. And you can drive in It's a sports field. They have soccer fields and ball fields and all kinds of other stuff. But right in the middle is the garden. And it's got surrounded by an 8-foot fence that's to keep the deer out from eating our garden. It doesn't keep the squirrels out, but they can only eat so much. So it does keep the deer out. But if you go on a Tuesday, there will be people there, and you can they'll be happy to show you around, or you can just walk around if you'd like just by yourself. But it's really, really beautiful. If you're coming from 242 and heading west on 242, excuse me, yeah, I guess that's northwest, at the Green Bridge light, you can make a U-turn and come back up 242. And again, it's a third driveway on the right. So there's 2 ways to get there. But it's worth a drive. I'll tell you what, it's worth a drive. It's one of the most beautiful community gardens I've ever seen. And Ann Hall is your workmate, and she has done a great job, as has the building group at the Woodlands Township, and Veggie Village people have done a great job on their side of the garden. I'm telling you, it's just beautiful, and it's efficient and well designed. And I'll take some credit for it. I handled the committee for the design of the Veggie Village side, and I actually oversaw the construction of the garden. So I'm taking some credit for it, but Ann and Veggie Village have done most of the work. So
Okay,
anyway,
we'll give you a little bit of credit, Bob.
thank you.
All right, now there are a few more questions, but mostly specifically things that I've just asked you that you're going to talk about more. One
Okay.
last question for right now, though, is about how long to know to run a drip system. Will you be talking about that a little bit? How you know which plants need more or so forth?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about that. I don't have it in the system, but in my presentation, but I could talk about that. I'll be
All
happy.
right, so why don't we give everybody 10 minutes, just 10-minute break. You can go refill your coffee cup. And when we come back, we'll start again. Bob will give us another Q&A break at the end. So take 10 and we'll be right back. Thanks, Bob.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, thanks for staying with us, everyone. Bob, if you're ready, we can get started again.
I am ready.
All right, go ahead.
One of the things some of the things I've failed to mention at the beginning of this presentation is that there are other organizations besides Woodlands Water and the township, Woodlands Township, and Texas A&M AgriLife, and the Master Gardeners. The Texas Master Naturalists, which Terry and I belong to, the Heartwood chapter is chapter for our area, has done extensive work and support on these kind of programs. Also, the Native Plant Society of Texas, the Pines and Prairies chapter, which includes Montgomery, Grimes, and Walker counties, and the Woodlands Greens. Somebody we know, I think, is going to be president next year. Terry, am I right about that?
We'll see.
Hello?
We'll see.
We'll see. Okay. All right. Well, that should give you a hint, folks. Let's talk a little bit about, we were talking about soaker hoses. First of all, this T-tape, just to remind you, I'm not a big fan of this, but if you'd like it, try it. Soaker hoses, I'm also not a big fan of soaker hoses. I have several. They get clogged up really easy. They're made of a porous material, and the water kind of seeps through. They clog up really easily, and I just have to go through them and run some water through them at a higher rate just to unclog them. But it's really a hassle to use these things. So I don't use them. So let's talk a little bit more about, you see this purple pipe here? Purple pipe is required on public facilities when you're putting in a drip irrigation or any kind of other situation where you're putting pipe through, water pipes. And this indicates non-potable water. So I can't imagine somebody coming over here and cutting this line and drinking out of that water. In fact, you won't even be able to see the lawn once this is planted and the growth is going out. But anyway, the purple pipe. But the point I wanted to make is that, as you can see, this is an obstacle. It goes around the obstacle, but also, can you see this little line right here? This is actually a line that goes under, as you can see right here, goes under this concrete and comes back up to water this tree. So there are all kinds of ways to do it. There at Terry's office, I put in a drip line that goes into a brick planter. It's a rather large brick planter. And I just did something very similar to this, came up the side of this and water that planter. Otherwise, we had drip irrigation all around it. So it's just a good idea to look at this. A median, this is a closed loop. As I showed you before, this is actually hooked into the meter, and the meter goes in here and it just goes around. They put a line all the way across here and all the way across here. And what this does is, this is a closed loop. So the water comes in, it goes out through all of these lines. It comes in, it goes through these major lines, and then is distributed across these lines. So it's a good way to do it. And if you're running your island in your cul-de-sac, you might think of doing something like this. Here's a new irrigation system. You see how they put this together. One of the questions that were asked of me was, how do you know how much water to put out on plants? That really depends on how far apart your plants are. If, for instance, you have fully grown plants, they will require more water than a beginning plant, a small plant. So what you have to do is, you have to notice, you have to see how much water is needed. For instance, let's say you get a plant. I have a lot of native plants that don't require a lot of water. In fact, they don't require any water unless it rains. So I don't really use a lot of water. If we have a dry period, then I'll water. But if you have other plants, ornamentals that are not native, or even your lawn, you will have to do trial and error, and just see how often you need to do it, and how much water you need to put out at any given time. I have put in a native plant garden at the Water Resources Building, and I have it set for an hour. The emitters are 12 inches apart. So I know that I'm putting 1 gallon of water at every emitter. So every 12 inches, I'm putting out a gallon of water. Now I have plants that are, for instance, I have roses, and I have mostly native plants, Turk's cap and lantana and things like that, shrubs, native shrubs. And so what I do is just kind of look at it and see, well, this shrub maybe needs a little more water. And so what I'll do is I'll wrap that line twice across there. The lantana doesn't need a lot of water, neither does Turk's cap, but they do need some water. So I just run a couple of lines through that area. So knowing your plants is better than figuring out how much water to do. If you know your plants, then you can start looking at how that plant responds. And what's good about these lines is you can move them around. You can actually move them around and do it. Or I was talking about using the 1/4 inch lines. So let's say this right here, let's say we have a plant over here that's not getting any water at all or very little. I'm going to puncture this line. I'm going to put a 1/4 inch line over here, attach it to here with a little plug. You can do that very easily. Put the water over here, put the line over here, put an emitter on this thing, and bring water to it. So that's a way of doing that. It's so easy. I can't explain to you, I can't describe to you how easy it is. It takes about 5 minutes to do this. Punch a hole with a special hole puncher, put your little plug in there, attach the plug to a 1/4 inch line, and put an emitter on the end of that line, and it'll water that plant. It's so easy. So you just look at the plant and learn your plants. It's not about doing something automatically. What drip does really is put you in closer contact with the plants and allows you to have more beautiful plants, well watered, but you have to be a little knowledgeable about how much your plants need. Some plants need more water than others. Okra, for instance, is a hot summer crop. It doesn't need a lot of water, whereby tomatoes need a lot of water. So if I'm using a plant that needs a lot of water, let's say I have a lily that needs pretty much water, or some other plant, then I know that I'm going to have some kind of emitter near that plant to get it to produce flowers or foliage. So it's really a kind of, it's not an exact science. You have to really know your plants. So I hope that answers the question that someone had about that. But it's so versatile. You can measure it in milliliters. Now here's a ground cover bed. This is all going to be ground covers. Eventually, you will not be able to see any of these lines. In fact, that you see they put mulch on here. They're going to put mulch on all of these lines for the ground cover, and all you'll see is ground cover and mulch. That's all you'll see forever. Now, I want to talk about subsurface drip lines. This is for lawns. A&M, Texas A&M, and Florida A&M have cooperated in doing some subsurface drip lines for lawns. And I'm going to show you a little bit about that. First of all, they dig a little trench about 5 inches deep. So it doesn't have to be deep. You don't have to go into water line, your sprinkler line deepness. All you need is about 5 inches. And you lay the line with emitters down. And these are just some examples of how you can lay those down in there. Some more examples. So you add I'm getting there. Well, let's go talk about this first. Okay, obviously, I've got these mixed up. So anyway, here's attaching a garden hose to drip tubing in planted beds. So here I have a drip system right here, and I have a hose connector right here. I brought my hose over, connected it to the system, turned the hose on, and bingo, I have a now for this hose, on the other part of the hose, on the other side of the hose, I have all those the pressure reducer and the backflow preventer and all those things on the where the hose connects to the hose bib at the house. It's a good thing. See, and here's another example of a hose connection. I'll just bring my hose connected to here, and it'll water all this area. And of course, having a hose caddy would help a lot, because you can, especially if you have a big area where you can move that thing around. Here's a drip irrigation with a valve on it. So I have my my regulators, pressure regulators and everything at the beginning of this line. And then I have a valve here. Why would I want to do that? Well, this is a raised bed, and I have 6 raised beds in my backyard for vegetables. And not all of them need the same amount of water. So I can turn off one of these valves and just run the water through the other valves or through the other lines. That's just an interesting way of doing it. But this is a great way to know my squash needs a lot of water. My okra doesn't need any water or much water. So converting an existing system, I talked about that earlier. So you can replace your sprinkler head, and nozzle with a micro adapter, and add pressure regulator to and filter to the valve. Here, the sprinkler head right here has been replaced with a drip tubing adapter, and there's a pressure regulator built into this system, into this little head right here. What I've done is I've taken out the guts of that sprinkler and put in a replacement that actually is a drip head, and it will circle this tree and put water down. So this is converting an existing system. So right here I have put in a filter, and you don't have to worry about this. You can get a whole kit just to replace this. For instance, Rainbird, I got a bunch of those from Rainbird, and I ordered them online, but you can get them at any big box store. And all you do is unscrew the top of it and put this down into it, screw this back in, and then put your drip irrigation system right on the top of this. You can add a filter, a pressure regulator, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we were talking about converting these things. What I've done here on this little drip system is this is my major line right here. You can see it coming through here. What I've done is I've punched a hole in this line because these plants were not getting enough water. Punched a hole in this line and put a 1/4 inch drip line up here. I would not do this. I would just put a drip line. I would not put a sprinkler like this on there. It's called micro irrigation, but I don't particularly care for that. As I mentioned before, one of the main problems with water in this area is fungal infections. So I don't like water on my plant leaves. So I try not to put it on there. Anyway, so I convert an existing system. I loop my system around, and then I measure across here. So what I'm doing is I'm planting my plants along these lines here, and this is keeping my pressure pretty stable through this whole thing and making sure that I get enough emitters through. Now here, I put some 1/4 inch lines for individual plants. So I have some 1/4 inch emitters right here. So these lines have emitters here. These lines have emitters, but these are 12 inch emitters. These are every 12 inches. These are every like 6 inches for a great planting for small plants. And this again, I showed you, this is a riser for the plants. Here are some simple components. As I said before, you can buy these on kits. So you've got all of these components and it's nothing to attach any of these, I promise you. It's very easy. I'm going to show you something. Here's a 1/2 inch drip tubing with an emitter and a dripper added at source irrigation. So this is another way of doing it. I have emitters on this line right here, but I had a plant right here. I have a plant right here that needed irrigation, more irrigation. So I just punched a hole in this line and put a little drip emitter right here, and it drips down the water and waters that plant. So just by looking at your plants, you know that this plant might need more water than the plant next to it or the plants surrounding it in a larger area. You can actually do this. It's very simple. You punch a hole, put the drip emitter in, and there you go. Micro irrigation fitting, you can just remove the sprinkler head with this system, hook this into it, and this will pressure regulate and it will adapt. And all you need to do is put this thing on it, this little 1/4-inch line, or you can actually get these with 10, 12 lines coming out of it, and you can feed plants in a circle like that. So here are kits. These kits come all together. These are different kinds of emitters that you can put on your line. You got to clean your filter. Remember to clean your filter. You just unscrew it, clean it. If you have a freeze, disconnect it from the faucet to drain, or unscrew the bottom of the filter. If it's subsurface like a lawn or under mulch, you don't have to drain it. The mulch will keep it from freezing. Or the underground will also keep it from freezing. In this area, I mean, we don't have permafrost in this area. In the north, they have, the ground will freeze, 6 inches, 8 inches down. But here we don't have that problem, even when it's very cold. So here's a drip irrigation connection to a garden faucet. Here's my faucet right here, my hose bib. I connected my backflow preventer. I have a splitter here in case I want to add a hose or something over here. I've got it coming down, and this is what I showed you before. I put my timer right in here. My pressure regulator is right here, and then my tubing adapter or my garden hose is right here. So I can do all of these things. It's so easy to do. So here's I just put my hose on, and this drops everything in: my faucet, my backflow preventer, a splitter, and you can see how this is done. And you'll have access to all of this. So my backflow preventer is right here, and I explained how important a backflow preventer is. Drip irrigation connectors, as I showed you before, this is in a line that comes up from my main line, my main sprinkler line. And what I've done is just put a connector on here and put an adapter on, and I'm gone. I've got my system ready. Here's a way to close the back end of your system off. That's really important. You can use an end cap, but I've blown end caps off by maybe a surge in pressure in the line or something. So I do this. It's a little figure 8 thing, and it's really simple to do. Here's a guy doing it right now. He just slips part of the ring over there, bends it over, and hooks it like this. And that will stop any water coming out of there. Okay, do-it-yourself tools and materials. These are all, I circle this because these are the basic connectors that I use. But here's a hole punch, and here's a hole punch. This is a cutter, and these are little drip systems that you can put on your lines. This is just another example of some different tubing areas. A faucet timer, electric or manual. Emitters. These are emitters where you can run different kinds of water, different amounts of water through your area. And here's the other thing too. If you want to test how much water is coming out for a specific plant, you can actually put a little tuna can or something under your emitter and run it for an hour and see how much water is coming out, or run it for 10 minutes and see how much water is coming out. You can pretty well gauge how much that plant needs to water 6 inches, because you want to go down 6 inches. Now, this is the thing I was talking about earlier about A&M in Texas and A&M in Florida. This is a rotary trencher. You're going to dig some trenches with this, only 5 inches deep. Here's a drip line I put in just at 5 inches and put it right in here. Planted my sod, backfilled the trenches and planted the sod. All right. And here is 1 week after installation. That's zoysia grass. And here's 90 days later. Pretty nice. Under new turf, here's a large area that's being put in. And this is a whole field that they're putting in. I'm going to skip this. This is a manual system, and each row has its own gate valve. So I explained that earlier. You could actually do that. And he's actually feeding it through a rainwater system. And he does not have a pump. So this is all gravity flow. Soaker hoses again, I don't like them. You can use them if you like. They're inexpensive, but I don't think they're worth the money. And that's the soaker hoses. Irrigation, you got to check your system monthly. Just kind of go over it and look at it. If you're not doing that, then you're, especially if you have a vegetable garden, the rule of thumb for any garden is the best possible care of that garden is your shadow, which means that you need to go look at your garden on a regular basis, whether it's a flower garden or the shrubs or even a vegetable garden. You need to have your shadow on it. You need to look at it, and because that's what it's there for, right? For your own pleasure, or to eat, or to give to neighbors. But what you want to do is have your shadow on that. You also want to put mulch in there. Mulch saves water. It keeps any water from the soil evaporation. It's called evapotranspiration, and it comes up from the soil. So you want a 2 to 4 inch mulch layer in a flower, ground cover, garden, shrub areas. I would suggest that you use non-dyed mulch. In other words, natural mulch. Dyed mulch has some serious problems, and I'll tell you what they are. Dyed mulch, previous to 2003, most lumber was pressure treated with something called chromated copper arsenate. So it was treated with arsenic, basically. Pallets, loading pallets, decks, fences, anything that might be exposed to the weather were treated with chromated copper arsenate. The problem with that is a lot of companies were taking the used lumber from the pallets or decks that were being replaced or fence wood and grinding it up and dyeing it and calling it dyed mulch, which it wasn't. It was just ground up arsenic induced wood. So I suggest that people be very, very careful in ordering that. It was banned in 2003, the chromated copper arsenate, but there's still a lot of decks out there and a lot of fence posts and a lot of pallets. There are millions and millions, probably billions of pallets that are still out there that have been treated with chromated copper arsenate. And what happens when you put that dyed mulch on your soil? First of all, if it's from that kind of chromated copper arsenate, then it will not decay. It will stay there forever, unless it's washed away. And then you have other problems with it polluting the water sources. Or your kids or your dog or your family will walk through that and track chromated copper arsenate into the house. And it will embed in the carpet or somewhere else. So it's important to check. Now, manufacturers of dyed mulch are not required to tell you where that mulch came from, but I would be extremely, extremely careful in putting dyed mulch in. That's my hint for the day. Okay, we're almost through. Let's see how we're doing with time. I think we're doing okay with time, right, Terry?
We're doing fine. We need to leave some Q&A time at the end. So
Okay.
yeah, let's finish up.
Okay, well, we're getting close to the end. So here are some examples of gardening in the area which I think are extremely nice. This is a drip irrigation garden. And you can see there are no native plants in here, but there are a lot of other plants that are absolutely beautiful. Here's drip on some really nice plants here, and you can see the drip right here and right here, and that's getting down into the roots of these plants. Here's another example, and this is just beautiful. There's some foxgloves over here. There's just really pretty areas. Another pretty area with a little fountain here and they've got drip around here. And then under the mulch, he does have some upright sprayers here. This is another garden in the area that has a drip irrigation. And here's the other thing, you know, potted plants. What he has here, I'll show you another example in a minute, but what he has here is he has a 1/2-inch drip line, and he has these little emitters, these little 1/4-inch emitters coming up. They have, they have no holes in them at all, but he has an emitter on the end, this little red thing right here. And what that's doing is that's dripping water into his potted plants at a regular interval. And potted plants do really well on drip. In fact, if you'll go to some of the nurseries have some wonderful examples of drip irrigation. And why is that? Well, because the nursery owners know that drip irrigation is so much more efficient than raised sprinkler irrigation. And that's why they use it, not because it's, you know, it's cheaper, but it is cheaper. They use it because it's more efficient, and they're saving water that way. This is an interesting thing. He's got this set up for drip, but I thought this was really interesting. This is Aquilegia. It is a columbine, and this is actually Hinckley's columbine. It's out of Presidio County in Texas originally, and it's a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. You can't see the flowers too well, but they're down here. They are beautiful columbine flowers, and they're not hard to propagate. And I have some friends that do this as a hobby. They propagate this stuff, and it's just gorgeous. It's a gorgeous plant. But you can see how his operation is. He's got all his stuff on here set up. So, and he's even got a good timer on here. I think this is a good example of what's going on. Micro adapter. Now, what he's got is a 1/4-inch line coming in here, and then an upright line coming in here, a stake, and then he's got a drip irrigator here. I don't like this kind, as I said before, but if it meets your liking, you can actually do this. I prefer everything to be in the soil. This guy, I don't know what he's doing here. I looked at this. This is at an apartment complex, and he wanted to water his drip plants, but look at this. He's got this on a faucet, a hose bib. He has nothing on here. He doesn't even have a backflow preventer, and it's going into a 1/4-inch line. He does have a pressure reducer, but I think that 1/4-inch line is not going to hold. And also he doesn't have a backflow preventer on here, which is really a problem. So we're going to trash this. I'm not going to use this picture anymore. I'm going to throw it away. But here's a good example of drip irrigation. And this is really simple. He just rolled it around like this. And this plant in this pot just is doing well. He's got some irises in here and some other beautiful plants. And here's a simple way of doing it. He ran a line through here, a 1-inch line, and then put little small drip lines in here, and they're emitting water into these pots. And one of you see, he's got some peppers growing here. One of the things that you can do is, okay, let me look at this peppers. Oh, they might have a little iron chlorosis or something on the leaves. Well, that means probably that it's got too much water and it's washing out some of the nutrients. So you want to cut down on your watering for this area. And you can slow that down by putting another pressure reducer on there, or put it on for less time. All right, this is just another example. I like this. He put it through a brick. This is at a nursery, and he's holding it down like this, and that's a good way to do it if you've got a lot of them. We are almost finished. I think I'm a little early, but I want to talk about this a little bit. Here is the address of Drip Depot. They've got some really, really nice stuff on there, and they're very inexpensive. And it's a great place to order things. And these are the last four are actually producers of this. Netafilm is a great manufacturer. They have some really, really nice, useful drip irrigation. Dig Core is another one. Rainbird, which I've been using. Toro also has some. These are really good things, and I'm giving you this so you can take your choice and look at all of them and see which ones you like or don't like. And here's some resources. This is Woodlands Township Environmental Services. If you haven't been to this site, I suggest you go here. It has got tons of information. Terry and her group put out a newsletter that is it's a blog newsletter, and it's fantastic. It's full of information, and their website is great too. So I would definitely go here. Texas Smartscape, another great site. Aggie Horticulture, if you're growing vegetables, this is where to go, right here. And it will give you, it's got dozens and dozens of different plants, different vegetable plants that gives you a step-by-step on how to water, how to cultivate, how to fertilize all of these plants. Urban Landscape Guide, also by a Texas A&M, great source of information. And here's the Texas ET station. Now, I don't know how many of you get my email every Monday. I send out an email on irrigation recommendations for the week. And I base that on two, or actually three principal areas. One is the Texas ET network. Texas ET network has in every county, everywhere, has evapotranspiration collectors that actually tell us the amount of sunshine, the ambient temperature, the average ambient temperature, and the current ambient temperature, amount of rainfall, the moisture of the soil, the evaporation rate. All of these things are from the soil and evaporation rate from plants. It will take all that information and digest it and put it into a understandable form. Then I go to the Harris County Flood Warning System, which gives me an accurate amount of rainfall in the last 7 days that I can use to calculate how much water my Bermuda grass, my Bermuda grass, my St. Augustine, or my zoysia grass needs for that week. Then I have a formula that I use to actually convert all those things, all those numbers, to an actual understanding of how much water you really need to put on your thing. Last year, I think we only needed to actually water 12 times. This is Turf. Aggie Turf is a great place if you want to learn a little bit more about it. I don't know where this came from. Rainwater harvesting, they've got a really great thing on there. There's also a book on rainwater harvesting at the Texas Water Development Board. You can go there and they'll give you you can download an entire book on rainwater harvesting. And here's another information. Irrigation, a whole lot of information on irrigation, and earthkind. This is earthkind roses, but there is a whole thing on earthkind plants. What you can do here is you can actually go to that site, put in your zip code, and what that will do is that will call up a bunch of plants that are either native to this area or have adapted to this area and are good for planting this area. So I would definitely go there and find out what, and also they have great landscaping ideas on there. So I would definitely go to that site. Excuse me. Here's my website, Gulf Coast Gardening. I'm sorry, I don't know where this yellow line came from. I probably did it in some way. GulfCoastGardening.com. I have tons of gardening information on there, both for ornamentals and for vegetable gardening, and also for soil conservation and soil development and things like that. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and what to do on any given month for gardening. Brenda Buse-Smith was formerly the garden writer for the Houston Chronicle. She writes a column called Lazy Gardener, and you can actually subscribe to it. It's a monthly gardening blog, a weekly gardening blog, and you can go here, thelazygardener.com. And she also includes a whole bunch of things about what's going on in the gardening worlds. For instance, there may be a garden show somewhere, or Woodlands Landscaping Solutions, for example, which Terry's very involved in, as am I. So there are a whole lot of areas that you can go by going to Brenda Buse-Smith and the Lazy Gardener. So you can subscribe by going to this email. Joe Isett. Joe Isett is a guy that I met. He works mostly in Harris County, but he goes around to areas that are low income areas and sets up community gardens. He's a retired plumber, and he just has done just remarkable work in setting up community gardens in low income areas all over Harris County. And I would definitely go there if you're interested in that. The Montgomery County Master Gardeners Association, which is right here, I write a column for that, but we have a whole bunch, there's hundreds of articles in there about gardening, just all kinds of aspects about gardening. So if you want to go there, you can go to that website and find out all kinds of stuff. Plus, you can find out about plant sales there. They have, I think, 3 plant sales a year, and it's gauged to what you do. For instance, there's a winter plant sale for mostly fruit trees, and there's a spring plant sale for just about everything you can imagine, and then there's a fall plant sale. So you definitely need to go there if you're interested in buying some plants. Heartward chapter of Master Naturalists. This is their website. Great information on here. Pines and Prairies chapter of Native Plant Society of Texas. Great place to go. That's a brand new chapter, and some really nice people involved in that. And for more information, I have no idea where that damn yellow thing came from. Excuse my language. You can go right here to Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. You can actually go here. The Master Gardeners maintain a hotline Monday through Friday. Monday every day from 8 to noon, and then they go to lunch. And then from 1 to 5 every day except holidays, Monday through Friday. You can either call in and say, hey, I have this problem with my plant, or what plant is this, or whatever. Or you can go in and bring a plant and say, hey, I got this problem. I don't know what this is. I got this plant in a plastic bag. Make sure it's in a plastic bag because you don't want it to wilt or anything. You want it to be fresh. And if they don't know, they'll find out. There's a microscope in the office. They'll look at it through a microscope if they need to. So they can identify what problems you may be having with your garden in any way, any kind of gardening. So I would definitely do that. The walk-ins are really welcome, and the calls are really welcome. There is also an email address that I just showed you that you can email stuff into them. So there's all kinds of ways. And this is the number right here, 936-539-7824. You will get a master gardener on this line. And they will, if they don't know the answer, they'll find out for you. And Terry, that's the end of my presentation. I think I'm pretty much on time, am I not?
Well, we do have some questions to
Yes.
address, so hopefully the group will stay with us for just a few minutes. So Bob, if you will, let's quick do a refresher walkthrough that may help address some of the remaining questions. So
Okay.
regardless whether they're running from a hose bib or doing a sprinkler head conversion, the things that are important to remember is the system has to have a backflow preventer, or the hose bib has to have a backflow preventer.
Yes.
If in either case, if you're converting to drip, you need a pressure reducer and a filter. And those for sprinkler conversions, they come as kits that have all of those components that you just open the spray of the sprinkler compartment, that little tubey thing, and pull the sprinkler part out and put that in. Is that correct?
That is correct. And it's very simple to do.
And for a hose bib, those parts are pretty easy to purchase and just assemble them in the line that attaches the tubing to.
Exactly.
Okay,
very,
so
very easy.
How important is a filter? Let's talk about why we want a filter in that line, please.
Sure. There may be, and remember, it's behind, or excuse me, in front of the, depends on how you look at it, but you have your backflow preventer, and then you have your filter. The filter is down farther on the line. So your filter, let's say you do have a backup in the line for reduced pressure in the whole system. If it does backflow, if you do have a suction in the line, that filter can eliminate most of the debris that may be coming back, be washed back from your drip system. So it will take out a lot of that debris. So your backflow preventer won't be overloaded or clogged with debris from that system. So you want to have that filter, and you want to clean it out occasionally. So if there is a suction on the line, for instance, a fire hydrant being used, you can actually save some of that stuff that's backwashing into your line. You take that out of the filter will take some of that out. That's why you have to clean it occasionally, because there may be sometimes you didn't even know it was going on. And so you definitely need to clean out that filter, but that keeps your backflow from clogging up.
Okay, so moving on then, in either case, hose bib or a conversion, how easy is it to mix and match different parts? Can we start with, say, a 1-inch line to run water out to an area of drip, and then from that main line we can attach 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, and we can pick and choose how many emitters per section, or we can buy it with no already installed emitters and use that punch and those plug-in emitters that you've shown, and we can put the emitters exactly where we want them. Is that all correct?
That's all correct.
So it's quite versatile. would you say that if we're running to a specific plant or running several offshoots of a main line to specific plants, that as a rule, the smaller plants would want 1/4 inch lines and the bigger plants would want 1/2 inch lines?
Yes, and that goes. I think if you looked at the potted plants I have, I showed, where most of all of those had 1/4 inch lines in them, because that's a confined space. And yes, for smaller plants, it would be better to have the little 1/4 inch lines with either emitters built into those 1/4 inch lines, or have a non-emitter 1/4 inch line, a 1/4 inch line without emitters on it, and an emitter on the end of that line, whichever works best. The nice thing about 1/4 inch lines without emitters on it, and just an emitter on the end of it, you can get it directly to a specific plant. The one thing about the emitters on the main line, or even on the 1/4 inch line, on the 1/2 inch or the 1/4 inch, is that you may not get water directly to the plant you want it to go to. So it's important to kind of gauge what plants need what. So a small bedding plant would probably be watered better with a 1/4 inch drip line. But a larger plant would need the 1/2 inch with emitters on it. So that pretty well, I think, answers that.
Okay, and adding to versatility, if we have, for example, we were running to a large bedding area with a 1-inch primary line, and then we're selectively choosing where to run 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch off that by using the punch and adding to it, then we can also, on those 1/2 inch lines, and correct me if it's possible for 1/4 inch lines, we can actually put those little valves so that even if we just want to run part of that large system, we can turn off valves selectively
You
to
can.
any of those lines that run as tangents off the main line. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah, you can. But the problem with that is there are different kinds of those inline, the emitters on the end of a 1/4 inch line. So you have to get the ones that you can actually turn off. And there are some that you can do that with. You just kind of flip them and they'll turn off.
Okay.
It wouldn't be practical to put a valve on the end of a 1/4 inch line, but it would be with the little emitters on the end of the line to actually turn those off. You can actually do that.
So if we're using a hose bib and want to put a timer on, is it possible to add a timer further down the system if we're running off a hose bib with a main line, say a 1-inch line? Is it possible to add a timer on one of the tangents to it, a 1/2 inch or
Oh,
1/4
sure.
inch line? Okay.
Yes, most definitely. I showed a picture where you had a valve that was going into a raised bed, and one of the and it had just a little valve where you could turn it off or turn it on. You can actually put a timer right there. And if you have 5 raised beds or 6 like I do, or even 1, you can put the timer right there at the bed, and it works really well for different areas that you have different kinds of plants that have different requirements. You can put a timer on each one of those lines, and they'll go off or go on whenever you want them to. So yeah.
And so especially running from a hose bib, or say from one of those rain catchment tanks we talked about earlier, the beauty of having a timer in that case is once you turn it on, you don't have to remember to go out in 10 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes. the timer turns it off for you so you don't overwater. Would you say that's correct?
That is correct.
All right,
That is
let's
definitely
move to mulch. It seems as though our listeners today are a little conflicted in whether what they've heard about putting mulch over or under drip lines. Would you talk just a minute more? I know you've talked about it, but tell
Sure.
us why mulch is a good thing, but how do we maintain when there's mulch on top?
When there's mulch on top, and I've had this problem occasionally, where a mole or a vole or a squirrel has actually eaten into the line. What happens then, the line is broken and you will get water coming out of that and you will see it. It will be spurting out generally, or you can hear it. I've had that happen to me, and you can actually hear the water. It makes a shushing sound and it's coming out. Either see it or hear it. You know it's in there, so you kind of listen for where it is and just push the mulch back and repair it right there. It's so easy to repair. It's unbelievably easy. It's not like digging up a line and from the ground and then having to cut the pipe and put in refitting PVCs and all that stuff. It's so simple.
All right,
So all you gotta do is listen to it.
how much a problem is it having mulch on top if we're going to clog emitters with it?
No, you won't clog emitters. You won't clog the emitters. I've never had an emitter clog. I mean, I guess it's possible, but I've never had one clog. The drip is so slow that I'm trying to explain it. It's like if you put a hole in a tank, it's going to drip out a tiny hole. It's going to drip out, but it's going to be very, very slow.
Okay.
So nothing, I wouldn't have a problem with that at all.
So the advantages of having the mulch in your bed to hold moisture far outweigh any minor problems you might have with mulch.
Far outweighs it. Yes, it does.
Okay, so backing up a second, you said it's pretty easy to repair if something does happen to a line. I mean, you would literally just pull that section of line up through the mulch, clip it, use those little grooved, ridged connectors, and just make a connection, a splice in between. You can splice any of these lines. Once again, for versatility, even off a half-inch line, you can splice in and run an elbow or a T to move a quarter-inch line to one specific plant.
Definitely, you can do all of that. It's so incredibly easy. 5 minutes, if that, to do it.
All right, now back to sprinkler heads. So we've got a sprinkler system and we have a fairly large zone. The zone maybe has as many as 8 or 10 sprinkler heads in it, and we want to convert it to a garden, a bed, and we want to use drip.
Okay.
If it was a large enough area, would you suggest that we may want more than one of those sprinkler heads converted to a drip head and run off a couple of main lines to run the smallers from? Or is one main line enough for a large area with the smaller lines running from it?
Now, that's a good question, because some people say that you can only have one drip line off any zone. In other words, you have to block out all the other sprinklers and just leave one in that zone and attach the drip line to that. I've seen it done both ways. I don't think it makes a lot of difference. You could put one on one end and one on the other end and meet them in the middle. I think it's not a problem. I don't think. And I know some of the irrigators that I know agree with me because they have practical knowledge. The people that have said, oh, you can only put one, are mostly academics. And I don't think they have the whole story. I don't know that they have practical experience on that.
So if I don't want to convert that whole large area to a garden bed and I want to leave some turf grass, would you say that I could continue to water my turf grass with a couple of those sprinkler heads?
Sure.
Would you suggest in that case that perhaps I use one of those shutoff valves from the drip head? So if I don't want that line running, and it probably is a benefit for both the lawn and the garden, that they could be watered independently that way. Perhaps, is it possible to put shutoff valves on sprinkler heads?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can do that, or put a timer on your drip. You
Okay.
can do that right at the sprinkler head when you transform your drip or your sprinklers to drip. You can put a timer right on there and do it.
Okay, then. So I think we've covered most of the questions. Just quickly, if you wanted to use drip underground for your lawn, if you have an existing lawn, you're going to have to dig those trenches we saw your picture of earlier.
Yes.
And you'll have to bury those lines. Would you suggest there is more maintenance to consider there? I mean, I've heard that if you're burying it underground, you need those copper emitters to prevent roots and such from growing into those openings. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that would probably be a problem. And I think you probably do need that. You would need that. I'm not a big fan of the lawn thing. I think it can be done, and I think it's a lot of work, and I don't think the return is accurate or acceptable for the cost. I think the cost may be just prohibitive and just a lot of work. And also, if you have a break in the line, that means you have to find it and dig down and fix it. I mean, you can do it. It's easy to do once you get there, but it's finding the leak, digging up part of that area. At Master Gardeners, we had a leak in one of our systems, and the only way we could get to it was to dig down. And it was raining, and it was wintertime, and so I was out there covered with mud and wet, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. So, with a drip under mulch or even over mulch, it's real easy to do. And get my umbrella and put it out there. But when you're digging into the ground, it's a completely different thing. But it can be done.
Okay, all right. I think we've kind of covered most all of this. Remember that you are going to get this recording. You are going to get Bob's slide set. I'm going to turn on my camera here for a second because we've talked about timers so much, and I happen to have a couple of dozen of these manual timers on hand that I use for various giveaway things. Those of you who have stuck with us through this and would like to have one of these, if you'll stop by my office and just come in the front door and say, Terry said I could pick up a timer, I'll make sure there are some at the front desk. Our address is 8203 Millennium Forest Drive. We're right next to Woodlands High School. So you probably don't want to come here between 2 and 3 o'clock because the school traffic is a nightmare. But if you want a timer, come by and pick one up. Just come in and say, Terry said I could come get a timer.
And they're free, right? You're not charging.
Yes, I'm giving them away for free. I only have a couple of dozen. So Hopefully you'll show up within the next week or so to claim one. Monday through Friday. The best time would be between 9 and 4. Give us some time to get in and leave in the afternoon. But you're welcome to come get one. Bob, you've been wonderful today. There are a lot of comments in the chat. How much people have enjoyed what you've had to say, how much they've learned. What a great presentation you've given. And I would say ditto to all of that. You've been great. I can't wait to come to the next time we hear from you. So folks, thanks for
Thank you,
coming.
Ted.
Thanks for staying with us.